Thank you. Thank you, everybody. As I often say, for those of you from African cultures, you might relate. Welcome, Auntie Leymah, to Hamilton. It's been an incredible journey, and as I stand here this afternoon, many of the faces in the room that I see, I recognize, and I want to say thank you to everybody for the immense support. I know Imam just joined us shortly. He was a bit late, so we want to say welcome for joining us this afternoon. I thought about reading Auntie Leymah's bio, but then when I look at it, I said I'll be doing myself a disservice for me to stand here and be reading a bio from a piece of paper. Because we grew up hearing the women on the field, and when we were on the refugee camp, seeing General Leymah Gbowee mobilizing her troops to hold warlords hostage until they could bring peace. So I felt maybe we should forget about the bio, and from my heart would be a bit personal about this. The way I introduce her. I'm also pleased that after almost 20 years, I can be in this room today under the same roof with my mother after trying to get her to Canada for 8 years. So she's somewhere in the audience as well. I wanted to make sure. And my younger sister also flew in to make sure she made the occasion as well. So. But Auntie Leymah, when some of us were as young as 8 years old when the war started in Liberia, we didn't understand what was happening as young children. We just ran around while our parents struggled to figure out how we would survive. And in the midst of that struggle, some of us ended up on the refugee camp as young as 15. And I still remember the fateful day in 2001, I think it was, or 2005, actually, when the Accra Peace Accord was going on with all of the warlords and the bullets and bombs were dropping in Monrovia while they were sitting and drinking wine and feasting in Accra. When you mobilize women, many of whom have lost everything they knew, their children, their families, and made sure they arrived in Accra from Liberia, and you did not stop there. I was on the camp, and the house I was in, one of the women joined our movement from the refugee camp where Liberian women joined you in Accra and literally held the peace center, the conference center hostage, that no one would step out or step in until a peace agreement was signed. And I want to thank you because I can stand here today. I'm able to still have my mother alive and my sister alive because of what you did. And I'm able to go back to Liberia today and do what I can do. And many others who go there all the time, Liberians from around the world, despite the economic hardship, despite the difficulties, I often say, the longer we maintain the peace, the better we will get. And I want to say to you, thank you, because many of us owe our very lives to the work and effort that you've done. So without any ado, I will invite General Leymah Gbowee up.
Thank you, Leo. He did his best to make me cry. And I try my best not to cry in public. Whew. It's truly a great honor to be here in Hamilton. I actually came because Leo is a harasser. Like, McMaster had nothing to do with you. The boy would text me, "Can we talk?" And then last night I made the mistake of texting him, and he called me at 9 p.m. I was like, "Leo, it's okay. I'll be there. I won't miss my flight." But it's really nice to come in the midst of, and if you've been in a country that has gone through war, and the negative image or images that has been projected about your community, it's refreshing to come into a space and hear great things about someone who should have either been a casualty or statistics in the prison system in this country. So Leo, I'm really, really humbled, happy, honored to be in this space with you. And because we're from the same ethnic group, I would gladly claim the auntie title, because in our ethnic group they say when the child is bad, it's the mother's child, and when the child is good, it's the father's child. But right now, your mother and I are claiming you. So many years ago, I grew up in a community where my grandmother, she's still alive, 111 years old. And trust me, she still knows 20 US dollars from 20 Liberian dollars. We grew up with 5 sisters, no brother. And we lived with Ma, and our parents lived right there. But she was the matriarch. And the community we grew up in was an impoverished community, but it was a community. Later did we know that we grew up in a bubble. You know, people say wealth is bubble, but sometimes poverty is a bubble. And the reason why I call it a bubble is because as children growing up, we never knew what hunger was. We didn't know whose father didn't work or whose mother didn't have food for them, because we shared. And if you went to play and you spend the evening, say by 4 p.m. in your neighbor's house, you ended up being given your bath, and they'll put an oversized t-shirt on you and send you back home. In 1989, when I graduated from high school, my parents threw a party for my sister, myself, and my cousin, but the guests were so many, the party overflowed to every other home in that neighborhood. And then the war came. The war came, and all of a sudden, that socialization that grounded me in people and understanding the value of having a community shifted. All of a sudden, we're being told that this ethnic group is not the best one, and these people are the enemies. You know how it happens, right? Those of you from Syria, Yemen, different parts that have seen war. 1 minute you're neighbors, and the next minute you're enemies. And so as we grew up into that space and place, it became the war. I was very angry. I was a very angry 17-year-old. Like many young 17 years olds in this room or in this place, I did not want to be bothered. As a matter of fact, talk about God. Who was he? The person who let us down, who made all this evil to start happening. And this led to a roller coaster of mistakes, from refugee camp to different places. But in the midst of all of this hardship, one thing remained constant: the presence of people to build you up. So as I journeyed through, I got to a place where I decided to do social work and went to school. And as part of my training, I was asked to go to an orphanage. And the one thing that I've learned in this journey is to know the level that you can absorb. Because if you try to be a superhero, you end up disgracing yourself. And not that I didn't like children, but I didn't like the treatment or the way those children were treated in the orphanage, so it immobilized me. And then I decided I would work with the women. And I went to work into this camp where these women had different forms of physical disability as a result of the war. Some had been raped numerous times. But I had never seen such an energy. They had such positive energy about life. They weren't bitter. They were hopeful that they would go back into their communities and transform it for the greater good of their people. And me, in my anger, would say to them, "What do you have?" They didn't have money. but they had the courage, they had the zeal that we could make a difference. And one day they sat me down and gave me the lecture of my life. Why are you angry? Were you raped? And I said, no. Did you lose a body part? No. And each one after the other, they started showing me. One mother showed a breast that had been cut off because she got to this checkpoint and she was nursing her baby and was offensive to a soldier. So he cut the breast off. Some talked about being raped, and one after the other. But through all of their stories of pain, they had this smile that, yes, we've been broken, yes, but we still believe in the power of women. And I told myself when I went home, trying to process that, was my baptism into the women's movement. And it led to starting a movement of peace builders, going into communities, and some of the things that people never talk about when they tell the story of us bringing peace to Liberia, contributing to peace, is that the process it took. It took re-socialization. It took building a community. It took understanding our collective humanity. It took knowing that even though we were from different religious and ethnic and social class, but we were one. And this is where I want to spend some time with all of us. Because we live in a time of mediocrity, a time of pettiness, a time of us versus them, a time of stupidity, if I may add. A time where people in communities and societies have forgotten that whether you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, if you cut yourself, the color of your blood is the same. And so we all find ourselves at a place now where it is more exotic to preach hate messages and teach our children foolishness than it is to talk about our collective humanity. When we started the Women's Peace Movement, the first time we decided to do a consultation between the Christian and Muslim women, the first day I brought the Christian women in the room. And what we did with the Christian women was to say, let's write all of the positive things that we know about Muslim women, and let's write all of the negative things that we know about them. And then the next day we brought the Muslim women in and said, let's do the same thing. And the third day we brought both groups together. And then we put everything on the wall and said to the Christian women, go on this side and read your Muslim sister's perception of you. And when they started, we took it from negative to positive. And all you could hear in the room, what? They thought they think this about us? And then as they went down, oh, this is so sweet, but it's not true. Because Muslim women were writing things like they admire Christian women because for those who were in polygamous marriages, that they had one husband, they were treated, and their one husband had them. And these women was like, that's not true, some of them cheat. So after reading all of those things, we sat down. And the one thing we wanted to do was to say, how can we tackle this war? But before we even decide to tackle the war, what do we have in common? Because society like today has taught us that we have everything against each other. What do we have in common? And everyone started naming things that we had in common. But my grandmother and her best friend, they were both Christians and Muslim we brought into the room. And they were telling the experience of their life story. First thing first, some of the myths were debunked by their conversation. Because my grandmother, who's Christian, is very quiet. Her best buddy, who's Muslim, is a radical. Loudmouth, never take back anything. And so as they told their stories of friendship, the Muslim sister said, when my friend told me her husband was not just cheating, but he was hitting on her, I went and found a lawyer for her to divorce him. So as they told their story, at one point they start to say, someone asked them, so what role did your religion play in your friendship? And this is a friendship at the time, which was almost 15 years ago, was 65 years of friendship. And they had that shock expression on their faces. Religion? And then this Muslim woman turned to my grandmother and said, when you see me, do you see a Muslim? And my grandmother was like, no. When I see you, I see my sister, a woman with similar problems, children who need to be fed and taken care of. And they turned to us and said, we never, ever question the way each of us pray. Because what we have in common is more than Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. That was the beginning of a movement that would lead to the end of the Liberian Civil War, or contributing to the end. Women then started asking each other, does a bullet pick and choose? Can the bullet know a Christian from a Muslim? Does the bullet know who has a child that is ill? And all of these questions just brought us together. We did this incredible work, went back into our country and invested our time and our energy into ensuring that peace lasted. But beyond going into the community, but also reaching out to some of the young people who were responsible for some of the horrendous rape and abuse that some of these women had gone through. Because we recognize that there is no way that you can end wars without coming back to building the collective humanity of your community. So today, what is our role? And Leo in Empowerment Square is teaching us that this is a space where we can socialize young Marcel and some of his friends to understand that, yes, your circumstances for landing into this country may be extremely different, but your chance of contributing to humanity is the same. And this is the message that I want to put out there. And this is the message that I want to stick. Because today it's so easy to look at someone based on the way they dress, especially me. I always come into places like these dressed like this. And unfortunately, you don't carry the Nobel medal on your neck. So I've been to places where I've gone to security, Homeland Security, and I get there, and I remember one of the times where this woman said, why does your daughter have an American passport and you have a Liberian passport? And before I could even explain, she went to say, well, I hope you didn't come to pop out more babies. And by the way, what work do you do? That was my cue. So I straightened myself. And say, I am the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize winner. And she slayed my passport. I don't know what they have in that database about me. But she went, I'm so sorry, ma'am. But you see, imagine how many people have lost faith in humanity based on one interaction with someone who was so ignorant. And imagine how many of us are being challenged by the work of Leo and by the work of many other fantastic people to step into the limelight and transform the thought that there are more evil people than good people in this world, because that's not what it is. A few years ago, I was on my way to the UK. I like to tell this story, and I was extremely exhausted because I had gone from community to community doing community work. And then I came home, changed my suitcase, got ready. I was on my way, got to the airport. So I'm reading my briefing notes as I'm going along, got on a flight, couldn't sleep because I'm more nervous when I'm speaking to young people than when I'm speaking to adults. Because I was going to speak to 100 young girls in London. And I was afraid that these young people look up to me. I have to say something straight that they will remember and help me do this work that we all want to do. So I had no time to sleep on the flight. When I got to the airport, we had maybe an hour drive outside of Heathrow. I was happy that I would sleep in the car. I was happy that when I read my itinerary, my driver had a Muslim name, and I was very happy with my very small thinking that, okay, he's a Muslim man, he will definitely not talk to a strange woman, so I'm in good company. So I get to London, and there's this young man anxiously pacing, and he said, and I see my name, and I do like this. He comes and grabs my bag. We get in the car, and he said, do you need, and those are the days of no WhatsApp and whatever, and he said, do you need a SIM card? I said, sure. So we stop at a local place. He bought a SIM card. Do you want coffee? No, I'm good. So I put the SIM card in. All I want to do is text my kids and say I've landed safely and then fall asleep. And so once I put and send the text, I close my bag, everything, prep myself up nicely to close my eyes. And he looked in the view mirror and said, excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'd like to talk. I was like, Jesus. Lord God, you have a sense of humor. He likes to talk. And then I said, okay, I'll indulge him for a moment. And then he said to me, you know, that paper you have in the name on there is, I'm not the one who should have picked you up. He said, last night I picked up 30 girls. And in picking up these 30 girls, they were excitedly telling me about you. And I should be home sleeping, but I went back to my office and changed the schedule so that I could be the one to pick you up. Because I have something to say to you. And I think you are the only person that I can talk to. By that time, I whipped out my notebook. I took out my pen, because I have all of these notebooks with crazy ideas that I'll sell on eBay when I'm older. And then he said, I'm Turkish, and my best friend is Kurdish. So if you know the history, you know what I'm talking about. He said, but we were both born in the UK. We went to school as normal British children. He said, my parents are Muslim, but I've never set my foot in a mosque because I'm a British boy. Or so I thought. And then 9/11 happened. He said, I came from a normal British child to a terrorist. I lost my identity. I'm no longer me. I'm a statistics of a young man who may blow up a place, so I walk into any place and no one see me anymore. All they see is a possible terrorist. He said, and I've never been violent in my life. And every time there is a bomb blast in any part of the world, a piece of me die. A piece of me is taken away. And he went, I think he just poured out his heart. No one sees me. Several months later, I fly to the airport in the US with this same baby girl of mine, who's 9 going on 200. But at that time, she was 18 months, and she had only 3 words: leave me alone. So we get down, and I'm exhausted. And then they take us into the room. If you've been to the US airports, you know the room. I haven't been fortunate to see the room in Canada. Go into that room, and all you see people with turbans and Eastern Europeans and Africans and the stereotypical group of people. You could drop a pin. And I'm trying to hold my child, pretending that she has a nice DNA. And all she kept saying was, leave me alone. Leave me alone. By the third leave me alone, I just like, okay. She ran across the floor, lied down, opened her legs, and started rolling from one end of the floor to the other. Got up and went and wrapped herself in the US flag. Everyone was looking at me like, seriously? And I was looking like, I don't know that child. And then this guy from Homeland Security ran past, and she hugged him. And in 2 seconds, I heard, Leymah, say yes, welcome to America. They handed out a passport and said, you can go. So as we walk outside, I said, thank you, girlfriend. But as I stepped out of that room and we got on our connecting flight, I kept thinking about this Turkish young man, my daughter's action. And everything those 2 things registered to me was that my child was tired. She wanted to be free. And she ran to this Homeland Security guy, hugged him, and in essence said to him, I see your humanity. Do you see mine? And this Turkish young man was telling me, I changed everything around to meet you because I need you to see my humanity. And today, the task that we have and that Leo and everyone else who's working are doing to transform our world, we're able to do those things that we do because we see people's humanity. We see the humanity in a black person, a white person, an Arab person. We see their humanity. And if each and every one of us could just see the humanity in people next to us, trust me, we'll have a peaceful world. My question to all of you in this room tonight, I see your humanity. Do you see mine? And do you see the humanity of those around you? Thank you.
So I think you understand when I say General Leymah Gbowee. You got a taste of why I said that. Just so you know, by the way, that name carries a lot of weight, not because of any reason, but because of the incredible work you've done. I've been struggling to get my mom out of the house with this kind of weather when she sees ice falling from the sky. But she wasn't going to miss this afternoon. So thank you for helping me do that. So at this time, the next part of our program, I'll be having a brief conversation with Leymah. We've collected a few questions from the audience. As you all can, empathize. Leymah has been flying all over the place, so we didn't want to open it up. We got a few questions already from the audience. People fill it in. I will be asking her those questions, or some of them up here at least, so we can give her the chance to get a break before she goes to her next appointment tonight. So I'll invite Leymah to join me at the seats there. 1, 2. All right. So we were thinking about how to do the questions to make sure they're very impactful, or to make sure at least it was fair. And I know how much Leymah cares about children. So I said, before she gets angry and say, Leo, let the questions be so, let me see how I can convince her to agree to accept the questions. So we went to our academic mentoring program where we support around 200 kids annually, newcomer children in Hamilton. And our director for education programming made sure she walked them through most of your videos to watch it, they discussed it, they came at it with their different perspectives, and they were able to come up with 2 questions that they felt were very important to ask you. So I will invite Ferdosa Muse Barry, who's one of our program participants, and Lemuel Nupolu Johnson as well. They both will join us up here, and they will ask their questions in their own words, so you don't think I took it and ask. So bear with us for the few minutes that it will take to get up here. So come up, you guys come up. So Ferdosa will be, I will allow her to go first and ask her question.
How did it feel when you got your when people turned their backs on you?
So her question was, how did it feel, I'm guessing doing her work in the movement, when people turned their backs on her, many of which she described during your speech?
So thank you for your question, lady. You know, when you start something, and when we started the movement, I was very resistant about being the leader of the movement for many reasons. And since this is a child asking me, I'll skip that part. But I remember when I had this dream that God was calling me to bring the Christian and Muslim women, to bring the women of the church together to pray for peace. I went to my boss and said to him, oh, you know I'm a sinner. I had this dream. And can you find your church women? My boss was a pastor at the time. Can you find your church women to come and do this thing? Because I think God is asking the church people to pray for peace. And he looked at me and smiled and said, Leymah, it's not that easy. The dream bearer is always the dream carrier. If you give your dream to someone else, you may not recognize it the next time you see it. So he didn't call the church women, he called you. So when we started that work, there were days that first we were trying to raise money. Come, let me sit. We're trying to raise money, and I would go to places where I would ask people to help us with 500, 100. And I would get, you're so intelligent, why don't you go and find a proper job? But I just resigned my proper job to do this job that God asked me to do. But initially it was very disempowering. It used to make me sad. But then when I started hearing the stories of the mothers who worked with me, it did not make me sad anymore. It emboldened me. So I would tell the women, if we're looking for money for transportation to go and meet a warlord, and we went to one donor that said no, we will walk. And sometimes we walk 2-3 hours to get to where we went to. And so, my dear, to your question, there will be many people who will turn their backs on you in life. Don't let that stop you. Don't ever let that stop you. Because if you allow it to stop you, you may never accomplish the purpose for which you came on this earth. You see, there's a lot in you, light in you, and every young person in this room. And it's only you who can turn that light up bright. Because people will turn their backs. But please, 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 don't stop. Just keep going. And one day when they turn around and see that light, all you will do is, ha ha, see me now.
Thank you, Ferdosa. Thank you. I'm having second thoughts. Maybe all the questions should have been from the kids. So our second question will come from Leymah, and I will let him to ask his question to Leymah.
How does it feel to be famous?
Leymah, I'll tell you something. When I won the Nobel Peace Prize, I was ending my book tour. And I had no clue. I know you're a big boy. You don't want to sit on auntie's lap. You, like, come close to me. So I was on a flight from California. As a matter of fact, Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, had done a dinner for me that night at her house, book party. And she said, oh, tomorrow is the Nobel announcement, and I vote for you, Leymah. And I was like, Sheryl, stop. Don't do that. I've never done anything for accolades. My mom described me as the person who sees a jump in the pool head first, never testing the temperature with her feet. So I got on a flight, business class, and it's from San Francisco, and all these business people in their crisp suits. I had taken off this African thing, put on a dress, tie my hair. If you're African in this room, you know what it is to let everything loose and sleep. And that's all I wanted to do on the flight. And so the guy sitting next to me and I never spoke to each other. I think he was just looking at me and wondering, this woman with the snoring should not, do something to my suit because I'm off for a business meeting. We landed in New York, and I put on my cell phone, voicemail filled, text message filled. My sister had done surgery the day before. She was in intensive care. And I was like, Lord Jesus, don't tell me this. And the first text message I read said, Nobel, Nobel, Nobel. I told you, my friend, that one day you were going to win. I turned to the guy sitting next to me that I had not spoken to all night. And I said, sir. He looked at me. I think I just won the Nobel Peace Prize. And he looked again. The guy sitting in front of us whipped out his phone and Googled, look at my picture, look at me, and say, yep, you sure did. No one had to tell me. I stood up, hugged the one next to me, hugged the one there, So I was like in the arms of all of the men. But the reality did not sing in Leymah. I had to give a speech that day in New York that the organizers were fighting to fill the room. By the time that announcement came, it was standing room only. There were limousines there. By the time I got to Manhattan, there were AP, all the news people, CBS, ABC, running to do interviews. I was like, what the hell just happened to my life? Famous? I don't think I am. I think I'm blessed to be in a space that I can use to be a blessing to others. And this is what I tell my children, and I'll tell you. Don't ever think privilege. Think blessed. Because when you think blessed, then you're thinking God can choose someone else. And so let me make the best of this. Even if you think privilege, tell yourself, how can I use this privilege as a blessing to someone else? So I don't know how to do the famous thing. Trust me, I don't. Last time I was in Monrovia in traffic, I saw this woman beat her child. And when I sit in my car, I take off my shoes. So she was slapping this 3-year-old boy. He fell. He's 3. You are not holding him. He fell. And you slap him. So I wind down the glass and said, why did you do that? I'm in traffic. My kids and some kids from the U.S. were interning with me. And they whip out their cell phones. And then she said, can't you see he's stupid? I said, I'm coming to show you what stupid is. So I opened the door, jumped down, and as soon as she saw me jump out of the car, she started running. I picked up stones and started chunking after her. And my kids were like, wow. The world should see this. No shoes, a Nobel laureate, throwing stone after an unknown mother. And the baby is crying even more. So I took him and said, sorry, your mother is... And then she was like, Auntie, why? I said, come, let me beat you. And she's like, I'm not coming. But eventually she came and I said, don't do that again. And gave her some money for the little boy. But no famous person acts that way. So, you know.
Thank you. You guys can go. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we just got a new definition for famous. When you talk to, because Case asks all the time what it feels like to be that. I will follow up with one question, and then we have a box here, the question box. I will draw from it and allow Leymah to speak to it. So Leymah, I didn't tell anybody what question to ask, by the way. I'm drawing from the box. It's mine.
Oh, they can ask anything, even about my love life.
There you go. So, so you've gotten her permission. But as I watch, and I've struggled to finish the documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. I've tried 6 times and I can't finish it. Every time I stop. Just because it's like you're rehashing everything. So many times I'll get to a portion and think I'll cross it and then I will stop. People haven't noticed, even at my office, because we've done many screenings. The movie will get to a place I'll slip out. No one would notice. I'll just slip out and pretend like I'm busy because it's been hard to, even after everything, it's been tough to look at it. But one thing I remember that you said, and that's going to be the basis for my question. You said, some people said the war was about money. Some said it was about power. Some said it was about the mineral resources. And quote, nothing in your mind you think made the children of Liberia or that the children of Liberia deserve what they got at the hands of warlords. What did the children of Liberia get?
Well, you know, the children of Liberia really and truly got the worst end of the war. I mean, when the war started, there would be summary raids in villages, and mothers would just pick up the babies that they could carry and run with. So 5, 6, and 7 years olds would be left back. And they would be left back at the mercy of those who have captured that village. In the earlier days of my work from 1998 to 2000, I primarily focused on, from 94, to start from there, focused on child soldiers. And some of the boys that I worked with at the time were 16. So in 98, I mean, in 2098, or you're talking 2000, they've 10, 12, not even 16, they've already lost limbs. And their whole life is just drugs. They're addicted. One was 13 when I started working with him, and he lost one arm. And when he told his story to me, it was that situation. There were 4 kids at the time when they raided their village. He was 6 or 7, and the mother left. Father picked up who he could carry, and he stayed and became a fighter. And he got shot. No one took it seriously. Gangrene, they cut his arms. But to survive, he then started doing drugs. So you have tons of those young people. If you go on my foundation Facebook page, on my birthday this year, I decided to do a street party for the ex-child soldiers, those boys who are now men, and they call them different names in Liberia. So this is just one part. Then you have the girls who were little girls when their villages were raided, and they were taken as wives to combatants. Today, some have 5, 6 children, and they have no outlet. But what has happened in Liberia is that when the war ended, there were so many competing priorities in terms of what should we focus on. Should we focus on politics? Should we focus on infrastructure development? Should we focus on... And the last thing people ever focus on are the children or the women. And so today, even though our war ended in 2003, the children still are getting the back end from, or the residues. They're still feeling the impact of the war in that healthcare is still horrible, educational system is still bad, children are molested, raped, and so you have all of these things that are still coming at them that we have not, as adults, been able to deal with. And so you have the issues of the war, now you have the issues of the human security demands that are not being met. So really and truly, if you look at the state of our nation, you will say that the future generation, the young people who are supposed to contribute to the growth and development of Liberia, still have a long way to go because we haven't prioritized their issues.
Thank you. Thank you. So my final follow-up to that is, I brought 2 books on this stage with me, and one is titled Mighty Be Our Powers, which you're very familiar with. And the other one is the project overview of the Liberian Learning Center that we've put together. The reason I brought them side by side literally was, this book that you wrote, in a big way, contributed to this book. And I sat to myself, and people often ask me, because we've been on this project just to research for a long time. I've talked to probably all of you in this room at some point. And people ask me, Leo, why are you taking so long? You know, you've talked, why are you taking so long? And most of the time, without any answer, I usually just tell them, you don't understand, because there's no way to explain. But this project, the Liberian Learning Center, in your own words, the circumstances we describe of children in Liberia, especially when it comes to education, how important, because I myself sometimes I question myself about the work. There are times when I'm sitting in my dark rooms and I ask myself, you spend 10 years of your life on this, should you be looking for another job? Or should you be doing something else? But then every time I go back and see my mom and my friends in Liberia, and then that slip off my mind again. But in your own words, how important is it for this work that we're doing in Liberia, that so many people in this room and out of this room have come around to try their best and make it happen?
So let me come back to me, and then I'll come back to this because it's linked. So in Norway, when we were going to receive the prize, I had 5 friends who have become my network. Along with my husband, they came in the room. It was the morning that we're going to receive the prize. And there was a lot of hype. All the tags from the new clothes and the new shoes and everything were scattered all over. And then in the next room, there were 15 women who had protested with me, all in white, singing songs of praise to God. And these people said to me, now that you've won the prize at 39, what's next? And then I go, duh, I won the prize. And they say, yeah, you won the prize, but you're 39. You're not 69 or 89. So you can't retire. What's next? And without even thinking, I said, I want to do a foundation to send girls to school. I felt like it was easy. You can raise money, pay their school fees. Life is great. And we got on that journey. I turned 40 the next year. We launched the foundation. Started with 7 students, incredible story. Today we have 526 students. 89 we deal with directly, pay school fees, buy uniforms, give medical bills, all of everything, including legal services when it becomes necessary. What I didn't project was something that I call my SDG moments. That you do not pay school fees and don't invest in the whole person. And this is where this project comes in for me. Because there's so much to do in Liberia. You may think that, oh, you're running a foundation, so Leo doesn't need to go and do the learning center. No, I want Leo to come. Because there are young people who do not fit in the academic space, but there's nothing being done to cater to that group. There are young people who, even though they fit into the academic space, but when it comes to university education, there is no hope, or they are not interested. They want to invent stuff. They want the entrepreneurial skill. They want this, they want that, but there's nowhere to go. I take my kids back every year. It's very difficult, especially during the rainy season, to find a recreational place for children. So, because everywhere is outside, we have the rainiest capital in the world. So when it's raining, there's actually nothing. But let me go further to paint a picture for you all. Several months back, I had lunch with a group of 30 girls. And we were talking about sexual reproductive health and all of the different things that had to do with sexuality and bodily integrity. And as we were talking, I asked them, do you all go on dates? Like movie nights? And so I'm trying to be fancy. And they're looking at me like, dates? What is dates? But to hone it in for you, because of the lack of recreational spaces, we have a population of very young children that are overly sexualized. So when I started providing health care for my students, we came from paying the local hospital $100 a month for medical bill to over $2,000 because we're seeing children as young as 12, 13, 14 with STDs, STI, because they're sexually active. In the absence of learning spaces, in the absence of recreational activities, in the absence of alternative schools, sex and deviant behavior becomes the norm. So if you are coming with this learning center, you're basically coming to save some young children from early parenthood. You're coming to save some of them from sexually transmitted diseases. You're coming to save them from going in the streets. 7 years ago, when I said I would start a foundation, if Jesus had given me a video to look into the future, I probably would not have. Last year, June, I was in Monrovia from June to September. By September, I had hives. No doctor could figure out why I had all this itchiness. We went into my diet, we went into cutting out this, we went into cutting out that. And then I was talking to the director of our foundation in New York, and she said, from every report you've been sending, you're having stress-related hives. You need to leave that space. 2 of my students had this very difficult situation of divorce in the family, and that was the last one that I would just say and stop. And so the father and the mother had been together, had 3 daughters, 2 teenage, 1 teenage and 1 near teenager and a baby. And the mother left and went and remarried and had a son by her new husband. The father got upset. You did not give me a boy. And then you went and gave him a boy, so I'm not interested in your daughters. But I will not give them to you. So then his mother is taking care of them. There's no school. A neighbor tells them about our foundation. So we take these 2 little girls, put them into a private day school. Midway into the school year, long story short, they drop out because there's lack of food, there's lack of this, all stories. So when I come and I send for the family, let me try and use some of my peace skills to do mediation that I don't like to do. And they come in and we sit down and I listen to them talk, but there was something off about the 14-year-old. So I asked everyone to leave the room to talk to her. First thing I said, are you sexually active? And she laughed. And I know my children, once they laugh, it's true. And then so we start to talk. The next time we invite the mother to do mediation, please don't forget that when they asked me, what do you want to do with this Nobel Prize? I said, pay school fees, not mediate family crisis, and be Dr. Phil. So anyway, the mother comes, the grandmother comes, the father stays away, and we begin to talk. And then I turned to the mother, I said, do you know that your daughter is sexually active? The mother dropped on the floor and started to cry. And then she turned to this little girl and said, how did it happen? And then the grandma, offhandedly, just as you see me sitting, said, oh, her uncle raped her. And the mother screams. But the uncle raped her. They asked him to run away because we have a rape law that will put him into prison. And then they take this child and carry her to a church for her to confess to God why she's so attractive to men. So then, in all of this, I'd lay back and say, damn, I thought I had seen it all. So, to cut long story short, I confiscate the two girls. They become my own. And dare the father and grandmother to take them. So I send them to a boarding school. They're currently at boarding school. And when school is out, I determine where they go for vacation, which is now their mothers. But this is just to show you the enormity of the problems that we have. You set up for paying school fees, you end up going into legal processes. Yesterday, I was telling someone, was supposed to be my free day before my trip to Canada. From a meeting at the UN, I get an email, 10 of my students have no shoes. Their shoes are all destroyed. So I find myself in a Burlington coat factory buying 10 pairs of shoes to take to Liberia. So this is my life. But yes, this project, if you have, and Leo did not ask me to come and do a PSA for fundraising for him. But I tell you all, every little bit goes a long way in a place like Liberia. Because if we decide that we will invest in people, you don't know who you're investing in. A few years ago, he came as a refugee boy. He could be easily discounted. Today, he's a solid member of this society. Your investment could lead to something like that.
Thank you. So if anyone has a pen, Yana, if I can get a pen, I will have her to sign this book. And in that same vein, I will let everybody know that the Rotary Club of Hamilton was so generous to acquire 50 copies of this book, of these books. And they've decided that they would give it is their gift of thank you to the first 50 donors. Their table is right outside of the room. It's open donations, but they decided that something memorable that you remember from this moment. Don't worry, it's also available online, just in case. Yeah,
Except that it's not signed online.
it's not signed online. So the copies that I have been signed by Leymah herself. So please make sure you stop at the Rotary table. I would wrap this up by just saying this. When I joined Rotary, I used to think it was a cult. That's what I felt. Because I was like, why people don't talk about these people? But it has been a blessing to this project. So I really want to wrap up and say, Auntie Leymah, thank you very much. We're grateful that you joined us. There are just 2 more things on the agenda, and we will wrap up the evening. For those that might want to chit-chat a little bit, please feel free. But just remember that we might have to let her to slip out just a little bit until she has to slip out to get ready. So I will call up Mark Stewart, who will come and wrap up the rest of the evening. Why Mark is coming up, I've made an ambitious call because in 2019, we are raising $500,000 to complete the first phase of the entire project in Liberia. I will be doing a 150-kilometer bike ride in June from here to Toronto and back, so 75K to and 75K back. I've never biked before in my life. So I've started my training regimen, just so you know, and we are looking for 1,000 people to donate $300. Minimum $300. That's all we're asking people. They are tax-deductible donations. Your emails will come out, so don't worry. You'll see the details. And those who want to join me to write, don't worry. You can do 10K, you can do 15K, just as you are able to. But I wanted to just let you know because we'll be sending those out to you shortly. Mark Stewart will join.
But Leo, just before we go, I just want to say one last thing to Leymah. That Leymah, regardless of how famous you get or how much people get to learn your name, don't ever forget your roots. Because my prayer daily is, God, keep me humble. Because it's in humility that I'm able to reach out to communities and do the work that I do. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
So very briefly in closing here, I have the privilege of thanking you, Leymah, on behalf of Empowerment Squared and on behalf of everybody in the room here today. And I was asked, and I know it's been a long event for everybody, an amazing event, and I'm glad we got to share this experience together, so I'll be brief, but just to reflect on what you've done and what that means for us as an organization. And when we're talking about Empowerment Squared, you'll often hear us refer to ourselves as a family, because that's how we see the work that we do and being part of this community. When I initially met Leo 9 years ago, he had already been talking about this Liberian Learning Center concept. And myself, like almost most of the people who have met him along the way, I knew very little about Liberia, but were just so inspired by the idea of the work that Leo was intending to do that we put our hand up and said, sure, we're in. And you can imagine at the time, the audacity to say, we're going to take on a project. We have no staff. Even Leo's not getting paid. Everybody's a volunteer. The United Nations have been in Liberia for decades. USAID, all kinds of other international organizations have been in Liberia for all this time. And here we are, a group of volunteers, and we're going to be the first ones to go do this and build this learning complex and introduce the first purpose-built library to Liberia, the only publicly accessible indoor recreation facilities, co-working spaces, and all these incredible things. And what I think is amazing is the power of vision and hope, and that all of us, in spite of having no resources at that time, we're like, of course, we're going to complete this project. And we've been building for 10 years, and never have we lost the conviction to know that we're going to do it. But in reflection, Leo, you mentioned earlier Leymah's documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. We've been showing that for almost 10 years now as a source of inspiration and vision for the work that we're going to do. And Leo and I travel to Liberia regularly, and I think 3 things stand out to me in reflecting on the work that you've done. One is that, as you did today, everywhere you go, Leymah, you impart a sense of hope. We were in Ghana, in Accra last year, for the African Youth and Governance Conference. We brought 16 young leaders from Ontario to this kind of African Union, UN type conference for young leaders. And they happened to bump into you, happenstance, in Accra. And they walked away from that meeting so inspired, so motivated, so ready to take on the world. And you just have that effect everywhere. But in a more specific context, when we go to Liberia, we're based here in Canada, and obviously we're not able to do this project on our own. So we're always recruiting. We're looking for people who are going to help execute this with us. And quite naturally, we often connect with people like us, young leaders in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And they're just like us, but the difference is they're so under-resourced, but they're there and they have the ambition and the drive and the intelligence. And they're like, if we can get a little bit of help, then we're going to transform our country. And these are the people that we've connected with. And what you've done for them, and they've cited you very specifically, is in spite of having challenging systems to work with, no resources to work with, no obvious path forward, they have hope because they look at you and they see what you've done for Liberia, and they believe that they can stand on your shoulders and do the same thing, which is quite incredible. Congratulations. The last thing is peace. We've entitled this event Peace and Progress in Liberia. So very briefly, this is an ambitious undertaking. But one of the things that shocked me, Leo said, Mark, come to Liberia. And I'm like, okay, well, I've traveled quite a bit, but let me just look up the travel advisories. And there's a lot of warnings, And I'm like, okay, but my brother's not going to take me to Liberia, if I'm going to be in a situation that's unsafe. And he's like, oh, but by the way, like, we're not going to stay in a hotel or anything. Like, we're going to go live in what you would picture as like a village or almost like an urban slum. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, where we're going, they've probably never ever seen anybody that looks like you. And I'm like, okay. So we're in Liberia, and we've been 4 or 5 times over the past couple of years for extended periods. And the tragic examples you've given with us notwithstanding, I've never once felt unsafe in Liberia. And I couldn't understand it. I'm like, I've traveled in all kinds of much more developed places in the world that are much less safe. And this incredible legacy of the premise of nonviolence and peace that you brought to a country that experienced decades of civil war, destroyed a generation, but somehow yourself and the people you've worked with have been able to infuse this notion of nonviolence is absolutely incredible. And without that, there's no way that we'd be able to bring this Liberian Learning Center to fruition. So absolutely incredible. Thank you. So that's my reflections as it relates to our project. I think we have a couple brief special presentations. Leo's mentioned where we go from here in terms of Bikeathon. We've been working on this project for a while. This is the year we're committed to groundbreaking, so we're focusing on our fundraising efforts. I think what I'll do is I'll call up our colleague, Yana Fazai, our Manager of Development and Outreach, to close off this event with special thanks.
Thank you, friends. Quickly, I won't keep you too long. I see some people leaving. Make sure you grab your book at the front. They only have 50, and they are signed, as it was mentioned. But before we wrap up, I would like to take the opportunity to say, Leymah, when we heard that you were coming to Hamilton, we did a happy dance. And then we started thinking, well, how are we going to pull off an event like this one? And I'd like to say that we did pull it off. But it's not just the people that you have seen here on stage, it's everyone, each and every one of you in the audience today. So I want to say thank you to the people who picked up my calls when I called about sponsorship. So thank you to those people. I want to say thank you to the people that took the time to come to the office and take flyers to make sure that we are circulating them across the entire city. I want to make sure that I say thank you to all of our mentors, everyone that's watching us through live stream. Excuse me, I'm trying to catch my breath here. A lot of thank yous. But yeah, thank you so much. As I mentioned, the Rotary table is outside. Some of you have already come up to me and asked for information about the Liberian Learning Center and ways that you can participate and get involved. So we will make sure to email you some information by Monday. And also information about the Bikeathon, because I know that there's a lot of people in the audience that are looking to get involved. Now, I know that Leo said, he's never ridden before, but I want to assure you that he knows how to ride a bike. Before we wrap up, I would like to call Christopher Cutler from the Mayor's Office and our friends from First Ontario Place to present a very special gift to Leymah on behalf of the city.
Well, thank you very much. And Leymah, we're never going to forget your visit here to Hamilton. And so we were trying to think of what we could give you that would remind you of your visit to Hamilton. And so I heard some people said the glass hammer. So a number of you are quite aware of what the hammer is about. Hammer is a name that many of us affectionately call Hamilton. And the glass hammer represents the heritage of Hamilton's working class, men and women who have built this city, and the work ethic that represents. And so we would like to present to you the glass hammer. I'm here with Tim Murphy, who's the general manager of Core Entertainment here in Hamilton, and Matthew McDowell, who is the assistant general manager. And so this is normally given to artists, musicians, performers, and I want you to know that you have orchestrated a wonderful symphony of peace and progress, not just in Liberia, but around the world. So thank you.
Now, Leymah, if they have any questions at the airport about the hammer, just tell them to call the city of Hamilton, and we'll explain things. Thank you, Christopher Cutler. And last but not least, you have heard that one of our main partners for this event has been Rotary of Hamilton. And I would like to invite President Nancy Baker to the stage to present a gift. Marie Robbins can also join us.
And also, hello everyone, and thank you for staying. And we also are absolutely thrilled to have with us Mana Sawamori, who is a Rotary Youth Exchange student from Japan, who is, like us, beyond excited to learn from you and to hear from you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm so impressed, and these are cranes. I made it, and the cranes are symbol of peace in Japan. And here is 200 cranes, so 200 wishes of peace. Thank you. So I want to be like you. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Rotary Club of Hamilton, we were pleased to decorate the stage with peace lilies in honor of today and a token of our thanks as well.
Thank you again for giving of your very precious time. I realize how tired you must be and how busy your schedule is. And thank you on behalf of the Rotary Club of Hamilton for sharing your time, for teaching us, and for giving our club the gift of Leo, who is a wonderful person. He's the chair of our International Services program. And through him, we have learned about the Liberian Learning Center. And this is something, a project that our club has agreed to support with a Rotary District Global Grant, and we are working very hard towards that. And Mana has made, perhaps you saw beautiful little cranes / peace doves that she has made, and she made them to bring here to support peace in the world and to support the Liberian Learning Center. And we've learned today how important that really is. And so please, by donation, if you would like, 100% will go towards supporting the Liberian Learning Center. And the same thing with the books that have been generously signed by you. Our club supported Leo to get that as part of the fundraising component that we need to do to support the global grant. And they're signed by you, which is very generous. And 100% of all proceeds and donations will go to support that contribution. Please give generously and be thankful. And my last thing that I wanted to say, I was thinking, what can I say about peace? I have lived a life that's comfortable by your standards. I grew up in a small town of 6,000 people at the time, and I was raised going to a Christian church. It was a Presbyterian church. And one of the songs that we sang when we were at that church that was actually my mother's favorite was a song called "Let There Be Peace on Earth, and Let It Begin with Me." And when you're thinking about your talk about humanity? Doesn't it start there? Thank you.
Thank you, President Baker. I'm going to close with this quote from Leymah herself. I don't feel I've done anything extraordinary, but take my light and shine it in the darkest places. Friends, I hope that you leave this event remembering that we are so blessed and so fortunate to live in a place like Canada and to have the opportunities that we do here in our own backyards. And I hope that we as a community and as a people can continue to take that light that lives within us and to shine it in some of the darkest places, not just here at home, but also in places like Liberia and everywhere else around the world. So thank you for being here and thank you for being a part of this movement. Enjoy the rest of your day.